Hello, everybody. It's me, Maurice Brown. It's the Maurice Brown Comedy Hour. And as promised, during this 3 o'clock hour, we have another outstanding comedian coming up for you, a faith based comedian on the Maurice Brown Comedy Network. And she holds the prestigious title as Nashville's Clean Comedy Champion of 2020. Her faith in Christ, which is always a huge thing, her faith in Christ is a tremendous influence on her performance, how she operates, how she moves on the stage, everything. And she's a member of CCA, the Christian Comedy Association, and she's been performing with some of the best comics around, Jeff Allen being one of them, and many others. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show the very funny and talented June Vaughn Colson. Hello, June. How are you?
Maurice. Hey, oh my goodness, so excited to be here. I'm just, thrilled to death.
I really appreciate you being on the show, June, and I love your accolades and your resume. As clean comics, we have it's not just being clean. We represent Christ and what we do and everything we do. And I just love partnering with performers like yourself. And right now, June, this COVID-19, it has just shut everything down.
Yeah.
And we can't do what it is we love to do. June, what are you doing right now in entertainment to deal with this pandemic right now?
A lot of writing, just writing and writing and writing. When God first started calling me into Christian comedy, that's the first message He laid on my heart was to write. I wasn't really sure at the time what that was supposed to be. So for about 2 years, I went, write what? And I met an amazing friend named Vaughn, and he said, okay, so June, you're telling me the creator of the universe told you to write, and you think if you sit down, He won't just, put the words at your fingertips of what you're supposed to write? And I was like, oh man, I've been circling the mountain, So yeah, I started writing on a book about 3 years ago. And then in between, God started putting me in more positions to be able to do stand up. And then I was focusing more on writing my material. And so when COVID hit, I knew that was the time. That was the time that I should really be focusing on getting this book done. So
right.
I'm in the last couple chapters. So, and then just daily getting up every day and writing. So, I've been doing some stuff writing with, my writing group every morning. And, but as far as like just getting out and performing, I haven't been doing that like most people.
Well, you know what, June, I don't know about you. This pandemic's been something. Now, for me, I've learned a lot of patience during COVID-19, believe it or not. I've learned a lot of patience, June. I'll give you a good example. Someone stole a car right in front of my house the other day, and I did not get mad.
But that is patient.
That's patience. Well, I went outside and I realized it was my next door neighbor, Jeff's car.
Oh, well, yeah. That's a little.
I let it go, June. I didn't get mad.
That's good. That's awesome.
Well, they say patience is a virtue, June.
Yeah.
But no, and so I really, I really have learned how to do other things during COVID-19. This is one of the things that I've learned how to do, and I've had great fun talking with comedians like yourself. And it's just so many things to talk about in the world of comedy. And I take it you have not tried comedy on the virtual platform as of yet.
Well, I tell you what's funny is maybe 2.5 years ago, one of the comedians in the Christian Comedy Association, Maurice, he started this thing called Punchline in Pajamas. And it was a virtual open mic. And so for about 2 years, every Tuesday, I was in there with people from the CCA, and we were doing these Zoom open mics, and people were like, it was hard to convince people that it was something that was helping us develop our material. They're like, I'd never do that. And now I'm watching all these people doing exactly what he started having us do, 2 years ago. as far as just performing on this type of platform, I haven't. I've done one women's conference with my pastor friend, Pastor Nina, and she's from Virginia Beach. And she just did it so well. And I still got to feel connected to the audience. But that's pretty much, and I don't consider that necessarily performing. There's a performance aspect to it, but it was more testimony involved and that type of thing. So
yeah. Now, I know that you won the Clean Comedy Championship in Nashville. I guess that was earlier this year.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. Pretty awesome accomplishment.
It was amazing. It was definitely a unique experience. It was actually this summer. So I think Leslie Norris Townsend, she's been doing this for quite a while, and she has them in different cities. And Nashville was the only one that they were able to kind of pull it off. And it was just so different than anything that I've ever experienced. They could only have 10 audience members. The audience members all had masks on. So you had 10 people in the middle with masks.
Yeah.
6 contestants to the side, all socially distanced, then the judges on the other side. So what laughter you were getting was very muffled and stifled, and and so like a comedian would come up, they would do their set, then a guy would come up and spray down the stand, spray down the hose, wipe off the mic, then they call the next person up. So you had this spray sanitizer going and spray the room, and I had gone the year before, and I mean, Leslie and her partner in crime, Joby Sad, they put on an excellent event every year. And the guide was so amazing last year. And I was like, I have to do this. And then I know it was going to end up being, kind of the situation that it was. But I tell you what, it was just really impressive to see how hard she worked, how hard just the Clean Comedy Challenge, the people there worked to still make people be able to connect and make the best of a very bizarre situation. So if anything, it definitely is a great story,
Right.
From what I experienced, but it was absolutely, Bob Zaney was one of the judges, Robert G. Lee, Johnny W., Andy Freeman. Just, some people that I got to get some advice from and some feedback from, and to just walk away, with a trophy and a medal. I have athletic boys, and I have zero athletic ability, and they've got medals hanging up everywhere. So Mama came home with some hardware. I was really excited about that. I've just been eating popcorn out of the top of it, But.
Yeah. Well, Eddie, who's a very funny guy. I had Robert on a couple of months ago, but performing in that environment is really. And at the beginning, we didn't think it was real. I mean, in March, June, I was making jokes about COVID-19. I didn't think this was actually going to happen. You're talking about spraying the mics down after each comic performed, and everyone's socially distanced, and you got the mask. I mean, this is where we are right now. This is what we're dealing with. And, I was on the Metro in D.C., here in D.C. Around the time this thing started to creep up on us, because we didn't think it was real. And someone cleared their throat on the Metro. They went, and everyone's head snapped.
Yeah.
They're like dead on the guy. And I'm thinking, wow, can't the man just enjoy his indigestion alone?
Right.
But it turned out that the darn thing is real.
Yeah.
I just find it difficult doing comedy because, as comedians, June, we want everybody packed in.
Yeah.
And we want a fairly low ceiling because you're going to compact the laughter.
Right.
And so in a socially distanced environment, cardinal rule 1's broken. Everyone's spread out. Right. And, and now they're doing that outside, which that makes it more difficult to get the laughs going. So long story short, June, I'm not sold yet myself on whether or not I'm going to go and do a comedy in a public forum yet. I'm still, relegated to doing Zoom, but it seems like more people are going out now, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think is starting to open up a little bit. I'm this weekend I'm doing Gutty's Comedy Club, and I've kind of been paying attention to what they've had going on there, and they're doing the social distancing and people wearing masks into the thing. And I've been to that club before, and I kind of know where the green room is, and the ability to be able to do it and feel like we're doing it safely. But yeah, it's definitely not the same. I'm fairly new to comedy, and that is one of the first things people were like, don't do anything outside, never do outside. 2 months into this thing, I'm sitting in Tennessee with a bunch of comedians from the Nashville area, and they're like, how do we do this outside? We need to figure out, where can we do this outside? And I'm like,
sure.
That attitude has changed. It's definitely changed. It's like, what can we do? How can we make this happen again?
Are you familiar with Vaughn Hampton?
I am familiar with Vaughn Hampton. Vaughn has been, man, he's been so good to me. There's been several veterans that just early on encouraged me and lift me up, and I just love Vaughn. He's fantastic. Yeah. And
well,
he's one of those Nashville area comedians.
Well, Vaughn, originally from Texas, he's a loud and country comic from Texas.
Yes.
And Vaughn's got a show tonight outside, and it's just Vaughn, and he's doing it by himself, and he's out there. And I'm just starting to notice that more comics are starting to do the outside shows now. And I may, if this keeps up, I might. I'm just waiting right now to see what happens with COVID-19, because the story now is it's supposed to spike in the fall and in the winter.
Right.
And I'm going, okay, so what's going to, I don't know. What, do you have a prediction, June, as to what's going to happen and how long this is going to go on?
I could have never predicted that this was going to happen in the first place. So yeah. I certainly can't predict when it's going to end. I think all we can do is work on what is possible, do the things that we can possibly do right now, and just let God take care of the impossible, so, I don't know. I think people are getting creative, and, as humans, God created us to be able to adapt to different environments. So, I'm not sure when it'll end, but I just say, just keep working on what you can possibly do, and then just put the rest in God's hands. It's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, and that's all you can do is have faith, June. Trust God; He's in control of all of this. I'm going to ask you a question, which is pretty obvious. You are a Christian comedian, but why do you perform clean as a clean comedian? Why do you do that?
That's the only way I think I can perform,
right.
I didn't wake up one morning and go, I want to be a comedian. I'm going to be a comedian. And I didn't have some kind of idea of fame or, special Netflix this or, what, there was none of that. It was just literally just the Holy Spirit kept working on my heart for, to share my story with people. And I grew up in low income housing and government housing. I grew up in rundown house trailers with, daddy named Hot Dog who drives an El Camino. Literally lived 2 doors down from a strip club until we got evicted from that house. Then I lived on the bad side of the tracks, and we were right next door to a drug house. And my mom's family had a lot of mental illness, and the way that I survived and the way that God worked on my heart and the way I was saved was through humor. I always say I don't speak any other languages. I had a student one time tell me I do speak country. It was like, yes, you do, Miss June. You speak English and country. I'm like, okay, well, but he just kind of spoke to my heart with humor. And there are a lot of things that I went through in my life that I feel like other people. I'm not afraid to, share my scars with people. Okay. And I think that it allows me to have some kind of credibility and to let people relax around me when they find out that not every Christian was born that way. I didn't come out of the womb and get baptized and I went through a lot of stuff. I went through a lot of stuff before the Lord was able to get a hold of my heart. So when it comes to comedy, it really is, for me, it is that vehicle that, he's allowing me to be in. I mean, I had somebody one time say, well, do you really think, like, when you go to a comedy club, you really think that's a ministry? Like,
Right.
it. And I'm like, I worked for 9 years in education, 7 years in special education. Every day I went into that school, it was a ministry, where God places you and he gives you the skills, that's a ministry. So yeah, I totally believe that wherever he puts us, it should be a ministry. So that's why I do clean. I mean, it is a ministry for me. I don't go into clubs and try to, smack people with Bibles. I just want them to, to kind of want to know after they hear some of my story, well, how are you so happy? Where did that come from? And,
right.
one reason, why I have joy. So.
Well, it's interesting when you talk about comedy as a ministry. Some people don't really believe that it can be a ministry. Coming up at 6:00 later on today, I'm going to have Brandon Young, who's a comedian from San Diego and a Christian comic at that. He's a part of the Rock Church there in San Diego, pastored by Miles McPherson. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him or not, but they have a comedy ministry that Brandon created.
Yeah.
And so, as you mentioned that, it's like there are not a lot of churches at all in America that have a comedy ministry.
Right.
And I think that the church has a real difficult time, June, accepting the fact that, you can laugh in church.
Yes.
You can actually have a good time and laugh.
Yes.
I just think that, it's very difficult. It seems right now, although it is coming around, more churches are doing stand-up comedy. You see it certainly way more than you did back in the 50s and 60s and 70s even. But I just out of curiosity, what would be your opinion as to why it's so difficult for more churches in the country to embrace comedy?
I really just think it just depends on the church and their experience with comedy, what they need comedy to be. There are some people that they may have had a comic before and it didn't go well, and so they just were turned off to it altogether.
That has happened. Yes,
you don't have to be a Christian to call yourself a Christian comedian, and there are people that'll perform because it's money and not really understand. Also, I think it's the sanctity of the pulpit, like depending on where you're standing, and you don't want to bring anything into the house of the Lord that doesn't glorify him. So, I think there's probably various reasons why. And then for some people, it is this is a serious place and we do serious things, and seriously, you're not going to come in here and make us laugh. And that's okay. Then that's not a place I'm meant to be, then that's not what I'm meant to perform at.
Well, a lot of comedians have made it bad because they didn't either get it, they didn't understand, or they were thinking about the money and all these different things.
Right.
And it's been a really, really bad experience. I work with a lot of comics in Washington, D.C. as a clean Christian comedian, and I'll go out to clubs and work with a lot of profane comics, and I'll try to, and I part of my ministry is to get them to understand that you don't have to do that to have fun. You don't have to use that language to tell jokes and share Christ. And what has happened with me in producing clean comedy shows, I've given the opportunity to a couple of comedians to come onto my show, and 85 to 90% of the time, June, they get it, not a problem. But it's been so systemic, the negative language coming out of their mouth, they can't seem to control what comes out of their mouth. And even when they are, they think they're being clean when they're not. It's just become so systemic. So, but anyway, that's kind of a side point there. But you're right; it has made it bad for the really good, solid, clean Christian comedians because of other comics not getting it, and it makes it really bad. Let me ask you this: how did you actually get started as a comic?
So as I said, the Lord just kind of started laying on my heart that comedy was going to be a way that I was able to do ministry. But I didn't know how to do that. I live in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I live an hour and a half from Louisville, an hour from Nashville. There's not really a comedy scene happening in Bowling Green. I didn't know any Christian comedians. I didn't know what that looked like. And I just remember the Holy Spirit was like, hey, how about Google? We got this thing called Google. So apparently God Googles, I don't know. So I Googled Christian comedians and I saw this Christian Comedy Association. Okay. And then from there, I saw that they had a conference. And so I tried to ignore it. I was like, yeah, I don't think it, so it's probably far away. It's probably a lot of money. It's probably, whatever. And the Lord's like, actually, it's in Nashville, hour from my house. Actually, it's not very expensive. Actually, it's on your birthday. So I couldn't, like every excuse I had not to go, God just kind of, checked that off. So I ended up driving to Nashville. I had not a joke written. I thought, I'll go there. I'll hide in the corner. I felt weird even around Christians going, Jesus sent me, because I thought they're going to think this girl's crazy. And I just sat back and tried to hide, but God used different people to just kind of pull me out of the crowd and start talking to me and encouraging me. After that conference, I connected with two Christian comedians, Lisa Mills and Kay Dodd. They ended up having a conference outside of Atlanta called SheCon. So I went there, I started learning more from them. And then by the next year at the CCA, I promised God I would come back the next time and I would go on stage for the first time. They had these kind of open mic things that I would do it for the first time. Comedian Michelle Van Dusen stayed up with me like till 1 o'clock in the morning. Another comedian named Dina helped me get things tight. Comedian Timmy Boyle. I ended up on his radar. So then he was like, you won't leave here without stepping on that stage, And so I did it. Mark Christopher Lawrence critiqued me and Rick Roberts.
Wow.
Right, exactly. And I'm like, it was amazing. Like I got up and the room was so encouraging and they said such good things. One person was videotaping me. One person was audio taping. So I would be able to hear the critique because I didn't even know like that was important to do. And then, from there, I just started developing friendships and material and, and the rest is history, I guess.
Yeah, those are some interesting names that you threw out there too. I know Mark Christopher Lawrence was on the show. I had him on maybe about 3 months ago, Mark, and Mark's been in a lot of secular stuff, but I think Mark has transitioned. It seems to be entirely to faith-based entertainment. He was in the film Sleeper Agent with Leland Colson a couple of months ago, and he's got a dry bar comedy special, and he's just a wonderful, very talented performer. And Robert G. Lee, you've got a really nice circle of mentorship around you, June.
Right. Well, with Mark Christopher Lawrence, that was the room I chose to be in. I didn't know him. He didn't know me. But I had seen him around the conference and just felt like this is somebody that I can trust to do this in front of the first time. Like there's different rooms you could go in, and I signed up for his room and Rick's room. I knew Rick, but I'd never officially met Mark. And I can tell you that's a moment that he will never remember. Probably will never remember me, but it's a moment I will never forget because he was so kind. He was so encouraging. And I can't say that Robert G. Lee has been a mentor of mine. And just in those moments where I was like, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? God's like, look at these people that I'm putting in your path. Like, it's just been a blessing to have people like that to invest in me or just say a kind word or encourage me. For sure.
Yeah, I don't think you could get more of a clear sign from God that this is what he's calling you to do, because you have such quality people that just came into your path. And then here you are, you're the winner of the Clean Comedy, competition here in 2020, even though it was under adverse circumstances. I mean, my gosh. So it's definitely a calling on your life. And there's definitely a need for the ministry of comedy, particularly in light of COVID-19 and coronavirus, and then the social and racial injustice that's going on in America right now. Actually, it's affecting the entire world. So we definitely need to laugh and just kind of let a lot of steam off. I want to ask you something as a female comic, June. Have you found it more challenging as a female comedian to maybe get booked for shows?
I'm so new into it. Every booking that I get, I'm grateful for. I'm not really focused on any that I don't get.
Right.
And if I'm not getting it, my brain doesn't default to, oh, it's only because I'm a woman.
Right.
It doesn't default to that. It could be it's only because I've been doing it a year and a half, 2 years. It's only because they had someone else in mind. It's only so far now, it's life, and there are people out there that I'm sure would probably, have maybe that train of thought when it comes to hiring me for a show, but I don't know. I don't choose to focus on it. Like I said, it's just not my first thought. I just don't go, oh, well, it's because I'm a girl.
Well, and the reason I asked that, and it just depends on how far down the road you've been into comedy, because I know a lot of veteran female comedians have expressed, that particularly in the secular world. But it is something that does happen from time to time, and I'm glad that you have never had any experiences like that.
I've heard chatter and those kind of things, but to be honest, the men, especially in the CCA, the bigger shows I've been able to do, I've been hired or invited onto these shows by the men in the CCA. So I've never felt like that's been something that, and that's typically the people that I do shows with. So yeah, it's, not a thought, not a worry, I guess.
When you think about Kentucky, you never really think about a huge comedy scene or anything like that. That's never the and you kind of alluded to it a little bit. But what is the comedy scene like there in that area, Kentucky, between Kentucky and Nashville, or is there really one at all?
Yeah, Louisville's an hour and a half from my house. Lexington is 2.5 hours. I've gone to I've gone to clubs in Louisville, and that was before I started doing comedy. But I'm much closer to Nashville. And so a lot of times people introduce me from Nashville, and I'm like, I'm not from Nashville, I'm from Kentucky, because they're just used to me being around these Nashville comedians. The town that I live in, it's a college town, about 85,000 people, I guess, population here. But there's not really any real comedy scene here. So before COVID, I was really kind of trying to work on that and was going to try and do an open mic here that was clean. I was going to try and work on, something like that. So right now, I don't really know what the scene is in Kentucky. Nashville is, they're trying to open up and get things happening again in that area. But, hopefully one day I'll be able to run a little bit of something here in Bowling Green one day.
And you alluded to open mics a little bit. So I take it that open mics are not venues that you necessarily hit very often.
No, I was fortunate early on to be invited into a writing group at Jeff Allen's house. You mentioned him because he's gonna be on the show coming up. When I was invited into that group, I was like, okay, you all know I am nobody and I got nothing to give, and Jeff is just a phenomenal human being and just so strong in his faith and one of the most talented comedians I've ever met in my life. And he gave me a safe place to come and try material. And then he started a thing called Comedy Lab. And so once a month, it was like an open mic, but it was his group of people, that had been writing for a while to run material in the town that he was from. So that's the most I've done as far as open mics, other than the Punchline in Pajamas, which was the online thing. But I had people early on, like, God might give you opportunities outside of driving an hour to Nashville to set in a club where, I grew up in a really rough environment. I'm not easily offended. I feel like there's places God's going to send me that maybe someone else wouldn't be comfortable. But at the same time, they're like, it might not be the place you run your stuff, to sit there for hours to run 5 minutes of some clean stuff that nobody in there cares about, to listen to some, where you feel like you need to go, wash it off your skin when you get back home. So yeah, my hope is to do a clean mic one day, to have something open for people who really want to run that kind of stuff and just work on their writing skills as well. So.
Well, I've been doing it since 2013, and I go to, I'll do comedy anywhere, but I stick with clean and in what I do. But you'll be surprised though, if you go into some of those environments and you just keep working on your comedy, you can make anybody laugh. You can honestly make anybody laugh. But it's murky stuff. My wife will not attend another one of those open mics with me ever again. I fully support you, but I'm not walking in there again. And so I understand. I get it. You have to definitely be prayed up, because you look at and you pray for those comics that are in there. You feel so sad for me that they're oftentimes young, between 25 and 30. And they are in such a dark place, and they're trying to make jokes out of it. And it's horribly murky stuff. It can get pretty nasty, and you got to get the prayer of soap and water out whenever you come out of there, because it's pretty challenging. But I didn't know if you'd ever traversed secular open mics or not. It's not. It's a challenge. It really is pretty difficult, and not a lot of clean comics like fooling with that. So I totally get it. I understand it. Let me ask you something. Have you ever encountered a church heckler?
A church heckler? No, I don't think I've ever encountered a heckler. Maybe some people who were overzealous.
Okay.
Who were wanting to be a part of it.
Right.
Not necessarily. The closest, I tell a story about my son when I first started going back to church. My son Ty had to tell a Bible verse to get on the van to go roller skating. That was like the youth group, thing or whatever. And I had really wrestled with God and my faith for a long time. I wasn't somebody who knew verses in the Bible or anything like that. So my son goes to the mic, and all these kids do these long verses, and he leans up and goes, "Jesus wept." And this little old man in the back goes, "Boo!"
Oh my goodness!
And I was like, "What?" And
Whoa!
He starts laughing, and I was like, "Why did he boo my?" I didn't know it was the shortest verse in the Bible. I had no idea. But he knew. This elderly gentleman knew exactly what my kid had done, and he was friends with my kid. He had volunteered with the youth, so he was my kid. But that's the closest I think that I've ever been heckled. And it wasn't even me. It was my kid giving a Bible verse. So, but God work on my heart. But
you get some really interesting reactions in church, and when you're right. You can't you can't necessarily qualify them as hecklers. I was doing a show for church last November, and I made a joke about the Cartoon Network. I said, "Why is the Cartoon Network on 24 hours a day? Is there any reason for that? I mean, is there some 5-year-old kid walking around with candy cigarettes, worrying about some test on shapes in the morning? I mean, is that happening?"
Yes.
So this lady stood up and she got really mad. She said, "What's wrong with the Cartoon Network?" I said, "Oh, ma'am, there's nothing wrong with the Cartoon Network. It's a wonderful network. I'm so sorry." And I went and I gave her a high five, and we kind of laughed it off and everything. But it's kind of interesting. You never know what's going to happen. Usually, you don't get a heckler for real in churches, but every now and then you get some type of outburst. Or something. So I wondered if it had ever happened to you. Now, the Jesus wept thing, that's it. But it was your son's friend.
Yes. Oh yeah. But I didn't. I was out of the loop of the joke. So I was like, what happened? What just happened? It was pretty awesome.
Dude, I got to ask you this question.
Yeah.
And you've been doing comedy for how long again?
I would say maybe 2 years at the most.
So let me ask you this, June, what is your worst bombing experience on stage?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so that CCA, when I went up for the first time, I was leaving. There was a Kentucky comedian in the parking lot. He was like, "Hey, maybe we could do something together sometime."
Yeah.
So he messages me. First paying gig. It was close to Louisville, hour and a half from my house. X amount. This is what I'm going to pay you. Just 5 minutes, just to open. He's being really kind. He was giving me that opportunity, right?
Right.
So the theme was trust that year. We had T-shirts that said trust. I got behind a tractor trailer. It said trust on the back and had a Bible verse. I mean, I was Jesus up, man. I was ready. I'm like, here we go, God. This is what you wanted me to do. Trust. Well, I get there and the guy doesn't show up. There was a wreck on the interstate. He was coming from South Carolina and he had been on vacation with his family. There was a wreck and he was not making it. Well, this was for like a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old girl's graduation party.
Okay.
18-year-old girl whose mother had paid lots of money to have the comedian she liked to come do the show.
Yeah.
And long story short, the woman finally was just like, well, just do whatever you do and get out of here. I was like,
whoa. Oh my gosh.
And he's like, if you want to run, I understand. I said, no, I'll do it. And I remember like standing in the bathroom and literally just praying. I'm like, God, I don't even know what this is about, but it's just you and me. Like, here we go. And
here we go, right?
I went in and I tried to soften her up by, just like praising her for choosing comedy, starting her life with joy and, whatever. And like, across somebody, when I walked in, were like, how much did you pay for this girl? And it was just like, and so
really?
It was so bad. And
oh, wow.
I finally got done and there was 3 older women in the front and the one in the middle only had one eye and she tilted her head and she goes, June Marie. And I was like, that's my name. Like, I didn't tell them my name was June Marie. She just said June Marie. And I was like, oh, June, is that your name? And she goes, no, it's my sister's name. And she kind of tilted her head towards one side. There were 2 women beside her and go, oh, is that June Marie? And she goes, no, she's dead. And it was just silence. And I was like, all right, thank you guys so much. I'm June Colson. You don't even have to look me up. I'm gone. And I just ran out the door. And it could have been traumatic. It could have been so traumatic, but it was like God just went, see, you're not going to die. Like, you may die up there, but I'm still with you, So it was very like, it was almost empowering to have survived that, the doors closed and they didn't want me there and I just had to do it and leave. So, yeah.
Wow. What a story, June. That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing. How long do you think you were up there?
Oh, way too long. Way too long. Because when I get nervous, I just rattle and rattle and rattle. And I was trying to relate to the mom in the back, and I really only had like 5 minutes of material, but I was just adding words to make it worth their time because I didn't know better. I really should have just stuck to the script and got out of there.
You know what, though? The main thing is, June, number one, you learned something about performing on the stage. You were like literally baptized into comedy because of that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the worst nightmare that a comic would have, particularly if you're opening or you're featuring for the headliner, is if the headliner doesn't show up.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, you didn't see that coming. So now you have to be prepared maybe to take that headline spot or do way more time than you prepared for. You know what I mean? And so now that's a nightmare. That is a nightmare. But that is a nightmare that potentially exists at every paid show. That nightmare exists at every paid show. It's like it can happen. The absolute unknown can go down, and it's on you. You have to go up there, and you got to make it happen. But listen, you survived it, like you said. I've had friends that have bombed, and they've gotten off stage and ran to the bathroom and cried their eyes out.
Yeah.
I've heard. I've had, friends. Actually, well, I had one friend that had to go seek a therapist because the bombing was so bad.
It's
It it
brutal
it,
out
it,
there.
it, it it's a real challenge to endure something like that. But if you can endure it and do this number right here,
Yeah.
and and get right back up there the next night or the next available opportunity, you just get stronger.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just get stronger. And that, hey, Jude, that was really wild. I think the capper is the lady with the one eye
Yeah.
giving you the business with Jude Marie. That's tough.
Crazy.
That is really tough, Jude.
But even more confirmation that like the woman's, as I'm trying to figure out, am I even supposed to be here? And they're like, someone on the front row has a sister named June, or had a sister named June Marie.
Yes.
Like, okay, all right. And that's happened twice to me now. The second time June showed up, I was doing a thing at the Hope House in Nashville at a cancer center. And I started out with, with the name my name, June. I have a pretty obvious nickname. And this lady in the middle yells, June Marie. And I was like, well, that was really quick. And she said June Bug. I'm sorry. She said June Bug. And I was like, really quick. And she goes, I'm a June Bug too. And, it was at a cancer center. And like, she was automatically connected to me,
Yeah.
So I always thought that was neat. It was one of the most precious moments. And one of the people I'll never forget meeting was this woman at the cancer center whose name was June Bug, and then this woman who had June Marie as her sister. So,
well, and the thing about it is, June, is that you can never really predict or prepare. Like, that's not a heckle. That's just an outburst.
yes.
And a lot of comics don't like that. But, you have people that get excited at comedy shows and they actually think they're helping. I mean, 85 to 95% of the time, they're friendly outbursts.
Yeah.
And you don't really necessarily want that. I've gotten to the point where when a person starts in with that, I'll go, yeah, you're right, but get this part. You're going to love the next part. And I'll keep going.
Right.
And they'll kind of just go away or they'll relax. I'm never mean to hecklers because most of the time, they're just excited. But it kind of throws you off a little bit. And then you learn how to get used to it. Let me ask you this, June. When was the moment that you realized that, hey, I can actually do this? Well, at what point or how long did it take before you realized I can do this? I can be a comic.
Oh wow! I think every other time I feel like it just depends on how it went. Whether I can do this. Other times I'm like, Lord, why are you making me do this? No, I think when the first club that ever let me do a show was Gutty's Comedy Club, and it was one of those moments where the very first night, it was just such a great crowd, and I got to perform with some great comedians, and I remember just walking off the stage, and everything felt like it hit, and people really laughed, and they enjoyed it. And I remember going to the back, going like all this work I've been doing, it just came together just then.
Wow, nice, very nice.
So it was, I've always felt like I don't want to say I have to, as if I feel like God's just forcing me to do something, but I feel like I can't just not do it because it wouldn't honor Him and what I know He's calling me to do.
Right.
So I always feel like, ready or not, here I come. Like, God, this is what God's called me to do. And some people are going to like it and some people aren't. But that moment, and then having some of my mentors make a comment about, oh man, June, I would never say I killed it or whatever. But when one of my mentors say, oh, she opened for me or she did this for me and man, she rocked it, or you should have seen her, or they're proud of me.
Yeah.
Because I'm an investment in them and they know that I'm taking in what they're doing. And I know that they get to have a moment of feeling like they've accomplished something by not feeling like they've wasted time with me. Like anything I do that I'm doing well is because of the people like Rick Roberts and, Marty Simpson and Robert G. Lee and Bone and Jeff Allen. And I mean, I could list like 6,000 people. And I'm not saying that as if they're not hiring me to work for them every single day. They're just people who slowed down enough and went, I see you and I respect what you're doing, and let me invest in you a little bit. So if I win anything, like when I got the trophy, all of those people have been a part of my journey. Everybody who invested in me, that's their win. You know, it's not just me. I didn't do that by myself. God placed me there, and then he put those people on my path, you know?
Yeah. And it's a blessing. And I think it's validation, and that God called you to do this, because that circle of friends that you have developed in comedy, that's not to be taken lightly. I mean, that just doesn't happen every day for a young comic, someone that's just beginning on this road, on this journey, and to have the blessing of those type of people around you that are willing to invest into you and to mentor you and to, you know, kind of show you around the business of stand-up comedy. I mean, I think that comedy, we were talking about the bombing part of it. It's just part of it. There's no there's no real way around that part of comedy. It's part of growing, because it's just going to happen to you. But if you can survive it, you're going to be better. In 2016, I had the privilege of being in the film Love Different with Jen Gotson Chandler. I don't know if you've ever met Jen or not.
I have not.
But she's in The Farmer and the Belle, Saving Santa Land. That's coming out in Thanksgiving. But and she was also in the Oscar-nominated film Frost Nixon in 2008. And then Tommy Ford from the TV show Martin from the 90s. I don't know if you've ever watched that show, but he was the guy that never had a job. So I'm in the film with these two people, and I had to check it out. You can get it on Amazon Prime or pureflix.com. It's a very good comedy. It's a faith-based comedy about one losing his faith in the Lord and coming back. But anyway, I was in a key scene, and I had a lot of script to remember. But comedy helped me to get the script down, because you know as well as I do, we have a lot of writing to do. We have a lot of information that we have to remember, and we're not just remembering it. We have to master it to where we're not like just spitting it out like a robot. We have to kind of like, you know, flow with it. And that's a whole other skill set. So doing the film was almost kind of easy for me, you know, because I'd just been on stage so many times. Stand-up comedy I think, is the purest art form that exists. Yeah. There's nothing like stand-up comedy. I think the closest thing is sketch comedy. That's difficult too. Improvisational sketch comedy is difficult. You know, and matter of fact, I'm not envious of trying it, but I think I want to do that because it's very difficult. But it's still not as challenging as stand-up comedy. And there's no question about it. But I do want to ask you this. How do you deal with the nerves and the butterflies, June, before you get up there on stage?
Prayer. Definitely prayer. Okay. I mean, that's really the only thing. I've always told people, if you want to increase your prayer life, you stand in the wing of whatever, or you're in a green room, or you're wherever, and you're getting ready to stand up in front of a bunch of strangers with just what what you've written and what you're hoping, that they'll accept.
Yeah.
And I mean, people don't want to be judged. People don't want to stand up in front of crowds. People shrink away from that, and we're stepping up into that and into a spotlight. So yeah. I said, when God called me into this, he's like, one thing you're going to learn to do is pray. Because yes. I really do have to I just have to pray, and I have people pray for me, because that's the time I think when the enemy comes at me the hardest. Right before I go on, he will start to circle, and start saying, you're not supposed to be here. You're not funny. You don't deserve this. That's you're only here because A, B, C, and D. And there are times that I'll call friends or I'll message and say, I need strength right now because I'm getting ready to go on. And especially in times when testimony and stuff is involved.
Yes.
The enemy definitely doesn't want me in that position. So he'll try to, he'll it's lies. And I have to tell myself, that's not my father talking to me right now.
No, that's not your father. That's not your father talking to you at all. Hey, Kenny, what's going on? I don't know if you're familiar with Cornbread Robinson or not. You know Cornbread?
He's pretty fantastic. He's one of the first people I noticed for sure at the CCA because he looked fantastic. I just remember him wearing, and I'm like, who is this guy? I gotta know who this guy is.
Well, yeah, Kenny's got the whole game going. He's polished, I'll tell you. But no, you got to pray. And I have like friends in entertainment, faith-based friends that I, always ask for them to pray for me when I go to a show. Anytime I perform, prayer is key. It's number one. Your faith is what buoys you. And so you definitely got to do that. I get to a lot of shows, June, and I'm by the time I get to the venue, I'm like this. If I don't know what I'm going to say now and I have to refer to my notes and I'm here, I ain't going to make it. So I have the mentality that, okay, that's out. I don't look at notes. I just, talk to the other comics or you just enjoy the show. I don't think about my set at all. And then about 10 seconds before I go up there, I'm going, how am I going to remember this?
Yes. Yeah.
But, it's so much information. And because number one, prayer, and because you've practiced and you've written and you've gone over it, it just comes out.
Yeah.
Just comes out.
I like, these are my words. I wrote this. Like, it's not like I'm trying to remember something someone else said. Like, these are my words. I'll have to remind myself of that, because I do the same thing. I'm like, I'm going to forget everything. Like, what's my name?
Yeah. It's just like, oh my gosh. And then you just get up there by faith and God just does this thing. I've looked at myself on a lot of shows I video record. And I look at it, I go, my gosh, I do not look like I feel. I mean, I've looked so composed and everything, and I don't feel that way. But that's just, number one, God, and then two, preparation, because you gotta do a lot of writing and rewriting. And I'll write my set, June, maybe 10 times. Well, I've gotten it down to like 4 to 5 times. I'll rewrite the whole thing. Before I perform. But it's an interesting deal. What is your writing process like?
Usually kind of a brain dump. I'll take, if I find this premise that I like, I'll just write, or a story that, because comedy is storytelling. It's just stories about things that happens. Like I do material about my dad, blowing off his fingers doing fireworks shows at the trailer park, and I basically just write everything I can remember about him, like catching his beard on fire, or like whatever he's done, and I'll write it all. I just dump it all out, and then I start picking out like what I think is the funniest parts of it, and then I try to kind of formulate it into a joke, like where am I going with it? So it's getting it just all out there, and then trying to pull back and write it in a sequence of a joke. So
as far as actually remembering everything, do you have a process of how you do that?
Mine is usually the transitions, like transitional words. Sometimes it's hand motions. I'll go like I kept forgetting one specific line, and then I realized, if I just look down, like I'm looking at this person, it reminds me the next word is up because I'm looking down. So sometimes it's a transitional word. Other times it's a movement that I do that I go, one thing I'll do this, and right after that, I know I'm going into how tall my boys are. And so the hand motion sometimes it helps me remember it, but it's definitely transitional words. Like I try to make it flow like a story for me. And that's usually how I memorize it.
I knew, June, that I pretty much figured out how to do this. I got booked to do a show in Baltimore for 45 minutes last year. As a matter of fact, that's where I had the incident with the Cartoon Network. But I was like, I'd never gone 45 minutes before. So what I had my wife sit in the front, and for each joke transition, she had a cue card.
Oh, wow.
So every time I transitioned to the joke, she would keep up with me like that. And so that just in case I forgot, I didn't want to have to look, but if I had to, that's what I would do. And I never had to do it. I had it, and again, going back to faith and just, preparation, and it's just there. You just spit it out, and you just kind of let it rip. But I found it. I went through the whole darn thing without ever having to do it. So that was
she was probably so nervous because she was trying to keep up with everything and making sure that if that was my husband, he would have been like, no, somebody else is going to have to do it, because I'm the person who's like, oh, there's a spot on the ceiling. I wonder if they had a leak. And oh, that lady's dress is cute. And like, I would not be the cute guard person for him at all.
Yeah, well, my wife's really funny about that. She's so mesmerized at the school. Like, I would ask her to video record some things, and she'll forget to video record because she's just going,
yes, yeah, that's me.
I'm like, babe. Anyway.
Yeah, that's me.
That's a pretty cool deal. Well, look, this has been a great convo, June, and I really appreciate you being on the show. This has been awesome, talking comedy and everything. We killed this hour, June. We destroyed it. That's been a pretty good conversation. Before we break away, though, how can fans follow you on social media or contact you for booking?
Oh yeah, well, they can find me at JuneColsonComedy.com or June Colson Comedy on Facebook and Instagram as well. So yeah, and then I think I'm June Colson Comic on Twitter. I don't do a lot of tweeting. Most of the time you'll find content on Facebook or Instagram. So
awesome sauce, June. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with the 2020 Clean Comedy Champion out of Kentucky. Very good faith-based comedian, the very talented and the very funny June Vaughn Colson.
Thank you, Maurice. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, June. I really appreciate it. This has been a great conversation, and we'll have to hook up sometime in the future. Whenever we get back to, normal circumstances, it would be a pleasure and an honor. God bless you, June, and everybody stick around for the Maurice Brown Comedy Hour at 6 p.m. We're talking with Brandon Young. We'll see you then.